Hey guys, Michael Ketchen here with another episode of the Michael Ketchen Show. As always, joined by Matthew Hitchcock.
How we doing?
And my near and dear friend, Dr. Jamil, all the way from New York, which I'm always giving him crap about to come up and hang out with us.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you for being here.
in person.
Yes, it's weird. I feel so. We worked together for a little over a year. Yeah. We talked. God, I had you on an old podcast and through LinkedIn. I feel like that was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's like you feel like you know. This is the wild thing about social media this day and age. You feel like you know a person, and then you meet them, and the first thing I thought today was like, "Wow, this dude's way taller than I thought he was." But it was great to put it meet in person and bring that connection together. But I was so excited to have you here in person today, to have you with Matt, to kind of bring you to the community. I know we're gonna have a great event tonight, The Standard. You're gonna be the guest speaker for the private members and some networking after, because everyone who's going to listen to this, for the most part, everyone's going to check this out. Everyone's going to be in our world. Entrepreneur, business person, investor, someone looking to get a little bit better, right? Every day, truly 1% better every day. You actually work with folks who are trying to get that little bit better every day, and you come at it in a very different approach. So first, why don't we just give the people a real macro, high-level view. What is it you do, and who do you work with?
Absolutely, man. And so big picture, I work with leaders, champions, and high performers. And what I do is I help them to remove the emotional, the mental, the energetic blocks that are keeping them stuck so they can break through to that next level of success in the areas of life that matter most to them. And that's been a journey now for the last 20 years. And when I think about each of us, I see it as we have four aspects to our being. We have our physical, our emotional, our mental, and then our spiritual, energetic, depending on what you want to call it. And I think most people in personal development, they're striving to get better so that for their family, for themselves, their goals, dreams, make them happen faster, whatever it is. They're only focusing on one, two, or three of them. But unless you hit all four, there's a holistic approach that's being missed. And I've just spent the last 20 years developing the skill set, the mindset, the toolkit to be able to support people in the deepest way I know how to.
And how'd you end up getting into it initially?
So big picture of it, because I can make the story last the whole show.
We got plenty of time.
We're not on a timer here, sir.
Yeah, it's 4 hours later. No, so big picture, 14 years old, I joined the track team. And I was in New York, and I became a runner. And I never formally ran. It was more of a baseball guy. Didn't make the baseball team, was devastating. And as a result of that, I joined the track team, and I had what I called my yearly cold. I didn't know why, that I was sick all the time, like almost nonstop. I'm walking around with toilet paper and tissues. My nose is all red.
Not a good look for a teenager.
It's not a good look for a teenager. I'm practicing 2-3 hours a day with my running. I'm not getting any better. And all my friends are. Fast forward 8 months of this, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? And then there's this intuition that kicked in, and the intuition basically said, it's your diet. And looking back now, post-med school, post all that, I don't know anyone who ate the way that I ate. And so I was like, all right, no one ever taught me anything about nutrition, about health, about fitness, any of those things. And so I started to look into these doctors that were very well known in the industry, their books, their YouTube videos, whatever, is around 2004. And I started realizing everything that I'm doing is quote unquote wrong or bad. And so let me make some changes. Made some changes, my health turned around, my track times turned around, and I started to feel so much more vibrant. People started making comments, hey, this looks better, that looks better, what's going on? And I started to get this excitement. I started to share whatever it is I was learning. They started to get better. And next thing you know, I just dove deep into health. And my father was a physician, and my mindset was I wanted to be a doctor when I got older. And I was like, oh, I guess I'll just get like an early head start on it now. Started diving into the health, the nutrition, the holistic medicine, that kind of stuff. And people started coming to me, and they would say, well, I've got type 2 diabetes, or I have a thyroid disease, or I've got this, I've got that. What would you do? And combination of really good heart coupled with a little bit of naivete. And I just threw myself at it and said, well, I would do this, 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 and this. And you try all these things, and they would do it. And their diabetes would go away, and their thyroid would start to heal, and they'd lose weight. And people were like, how did you do that? And I was 14 years old, and I'd have these doctors that were the heads of internal medicine, and they were saying, well, what if you had a patient who had this, this, and this? And I would just share, like, do all these things, really excited. And then they would come back to me 3, 4, 5 months later, and they would say, I told my patient to do those things, and they actually got a lot better. And so that sparked the initial excitement for me, the passion of helping people. And then at 15, I had this thought, well, what are the other areas of a really fulfilling life? I was already focused on health at that point. And the mindset came, well, relationships. and I wasn't in one. And the mindset was, whenever I get into one, I'd love to quote unquote do it right. Where there seems to be people that are 90 years old, they met when they were 17 or something, and they've got so much passion, so much love, a depth of an intimacy and a connection. And other people, their relationships keep maybe falling apart, and they keep repeating the same old patterns. And I thought, well, what's the difference that makes the difference? And I brought that same level of passion and obsession to who are the top marriage therapists, dating coaches in the world. I bought their books, their CDs, their DVD programs, and I started studying that and studying communication.
Yep.
Same thing started happening. I started talking to people, and I'd be at a school, I'd be at a family party. There'd be people 20, 30, 50 years old, and they'd say, so what have you been up to? And I just shared passionately.
Yeah.
And they would say, oh, my wife and I, or my husband, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, we're having some issues. And I'm like, well, and then they ask them questions. Next thing you know, I'm mediating a conversation between them. And this 15-year-old kid helps them in a way where 5 months later, a year later, they say, we didn't get a divorce because of what you helped us with. And it just felt so, like, it just lit that fire in me to want to do it even more. And then I thought about what are the other areas, and this intuition kicked in. It said, really specific, go on YouTube, type in Motivation 2005. Okay, I type it in. I get this like montage video of Tony Robbins, Les Brown, Brian Tracy, and other people with the epic music in the back.
Yeah.
I never heard of any of these people.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anyone who spoke like that or thought like that. And it just blew me away. And I started to see these videos of Tony Robbins doing these interventions in a seminar, 10,000 people, somebody stands up, they have some problem they've been seeing a therapist for 20 years for, and he fixed it in 45 minutes. And then they checked them a year later, 2 years later, problem never came back. And I thought, how did he do that? Yeah. And the foundation of what Tony does is called NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming. And I think about it as the user's manual for the mind. How do we create experience? How do we create, let's say, problems? How do we fix it? It's based on modeling. Who are the most successful people in the world? Think about people, whoever's listening right now, think about your industry. And think about the people that you would call the best of the best. They think a certain way, they act a certain way, there's certain actions they take and don't take. If you model that, you're probably going to create a similar result. And so that's the idea of NLP. So I self-taught myself into that, and I started working with people around phobias and their mindset, their health, and their relationships. And I didn't call it coaching because I didn't know what that was. It was just helping people. That continued, studied all the different world religions from 17 to now. And then, to make a long story short, my father had a brain aneurysm when I was 19 years old, changed my entire life. For the next 3 years, I was one of his primary caregivers. I took several years off after college to take care of him. And it just felt like a catapult in terms of my mental, emotional, and I'd call it spiritual maturity. There is this perspective of I was living my life from the paradigm of I have time and taking people that I really loved and cared about unintentionally for granted. And so as a result of that, these people that I cared about intellectually, they knew I cared about them. But I wasn't spending the time. My priority wasn't them. As a teenager, my priority was my friends, track and field, video games, movies, like not, let me get to know my dad man to man, soul to soul.
Yeah.
Like that wasn't where my mindset was. And there I was in the hospital after his aneurysm being told he could die at any second. And the mindset was, I blew it. I really messed this up. I'm not going to have another chance. And I was so fortunate that he lived another 3 years. He came out of a coma after about 2 to 3 months. And it was an uphill, climb to get him as close to back to normal as possible. But in those 3 years, I got to spend 10 to 15 hours a day with him. I had some of my highest highs and my lowest lows. There was moments where he had memory issues after that and prone to seizures. He almost died in my arms a couple hundred times. He forgot who I was at times. But there was also these beautiful moments where he became one of my best friends. And I really got to know him. And I stopped taking life for granted, people for granted. This might be the last podcast I ever get to do. Between now and the event, I get hit by a car or something. How do you know?
Yep.
And so there's a question I posed, everyone listening, what if this was the last time? What if this was the last time you were having a meal? What if this is the last podcast? What if this was the last time you were intimate with your spouse or your partner? What if this was the last time you were doing something that you really enjoyed? Would you rush it? Or would you slow down and be as present as possible? Because nothing matters more in this moment. And the thing is, that's always the case, but it's so easy to lose track of it. But that experience was so jarring for me that I never forgot. And so I just started to share this with people. And yeah, you've got your goals, you have your dreams. That's awesome. We want to have that North Star, that guiding light. But are you still living in the future and forgetting to be present? Are you missing all the magic that's right here in front of you? Because I use this Wizard of Oz metaphor sometimes. You're at the beginning of the I almost said the Golden Gate Bridge. The what is it? The
Yellow Brick Road.
That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
The Golden Gate Bridge.
Close it
I
up.
was just there for the first time recently. But you're at the beginning of the Yellow Brick Road, and you go all the way to the end, and along the way you're running because you think I need to get to Oz, and you
Yep.
think that's Nirvana, that's the heaven, that's where I want to be, that's my goal. And along the way you get tired at one point, so you slow down, and then you stop, and you're panting, and there's some guy just standing in the corner. And this guy seems to be staring at the nature, the trees, the flowers. And you're looking at this guy going, sir, what are you doing? And he goes, isn't it beautiful? I'm just taking it in. And you think he's weird. And you're going, what are you doing? Like, there it is, the goal. And then, all right, you take off sprinting. You're running. And then you find you get tired again. You stop. You run to somebody else. And now you get this guy, different person. He's looking around, looking at these flowers. And he goes, don't you see it? And you look and you go, wow, that's a really beautiful flower. Is that the only one? And he goes, they've literally been alongside the entire road this
Yep.
whole time. And you go, oh, I didn't notice. And then and then you take off sprinting. You finally get to the door and you knock, and it's like in the movie, who rang that bell?
Yeah.
And the door opens and the guy goes, well, you made it. This is the end. How was it? And you go, what do you mean? Like, this is what I've been living my whole life for this moment. And he goes, oh, this is like, you're about to die. Like, this is the end.
Goodbye.
How was your experience? And the thing is, you didn't have one because your experience was rush. Your
Yeah.
experience was never slow down, because those two guys that were on the road that you ran into and anyone else that you ran by that was doing the similar thing, they're going to get there too eventually. But the thing is, they actually want to live their life. They want to experience it.
I've been playing with an idea a lot too. I'm starting to play around with the idea of writing a book. I put down some stuff. And one of the ideas we've been playing with, this conversation we had the other night, which leads perfectly into that. And I don't think as entrepreneurs we talk about it enough. And I think the combo you just hit on, there's that intentionality. And it's, okay, spending moments with the people you care deeply about. How present are you being?
Yeah.
The other side of that is this urgency and this goal that I have to get into business. So what I'm starting to realize more and more is we have to be present in the moment to be intentional for those we care about.
Yeah.
And we can actually get more of it by, basically in my mind's eye, I have this idea of like, think of it like a pyramid, right? It's like if you only knew you had 1 minute left, you know, how intentional would you be? 10 minutes, 10 months, a year, on and on. Down to 100 years. If you had 100 years, you're probably gonna take things for granted. Mm-hmm. Conversely, in business, if we think in 100 years,
Yep.
and then we go backwards to get so intentional in the next step,
Yeah.
we can support the lifestyle that affords us
Yep.
the time to be intentional.
Yeah.
And that's where I think those crossroads intercept. I know some of the work you do, and that was a great segue with it, but when you talk to entrepreneurs like me, entrepreneurs like Matt, they come in as these hot messes all over the place. What is one of the themes that you tend to notice? Because like you just said, we're all on that yellow brick road, right?
Yeah.
We're always going, what's the next big thing? Eat what you kill. What's the next big goal? What is one theme you kind of see from a lot of highly successful people when they're first starting, and maybe as they progress towards their goal and working with you and just mindset, growth mindset overall?
Yeah. So the big thing I notice with every person that I work with, I call them the 4 horsemen of your apocalypse.
Oh, jeez. I don't want to know my word.
And the big idea is these are the 4 primary things that everyone has these to one degree or another, and it's limiting you and sabotaging you. And it's usually unconscious where you're not even aware of it. It's driving the show. It's kind of like the programming, the blueprint underneath.
Yep.
And if you are aware of it, you likely don't know what to do about it.
Okay.
And so the first one is identity limiters. And so the idea is, how do you see yourself? What's the story you tell yourself about yourself? What's the identity you've taken on based on other people?
Yep.
So I love that the word identity actually means repeated being. So identity is not some static thing. This is who I am. Identity is a creation. It's who you repeatedly be. But the thing is, you've repeatedly been it so many times that you forgot. So you think this is just who I am.
Wow.
And so when your identity is based on, let's say you grew up in a place where money was scarce, or you grew up in a place where your family had certain beliefs about people who had money. Those beliefs are in that programming that you've got that you're not even aware of in that subconscious mind. So then now every time you start to make money, I'll give you an example. There was a client of mine years ago. He tells me in our first call before he became a client, he says, well, Doc, he called me Doc. He goes, Doc, this is what I want. I'd love to be the #1 real estate broker in the country. And I was like, love that. Like, I love the ambition, love the fire. But I was curious. And I said, why do you want that? And he's like, oh, well, for this reason. And I was like, cool. But in my mind, it was like, that wasn't deep enough. All right, why do you want that? I asked him that probably 10 times. Around that 10th time, he started to cry.
Yeah.
And I said, would you mind sharing with me what's coming up for you? And he said, I never realized this. And he said, this whole time I've been so driven because I believe that if I become number one, maybe my dad will finally tell me he loves me. Because growing up for him, his sister, 3 years younger than him, he was like, in his words, she's daddy's little princess. She's perfect the way she is and doesn't need to do anything to get the love, the attention, the validation.
Yep.
He had to be the star athlete and the straight A student just to get a good job from his dad. So he equates success and achievement with love. Many of us do that. We're not even aware of it. Or your family growing up doesn't have much money, but your parents, or one of them at least, whoever's louder, they've got this mindset. People who have money are crooks, or the rich people are bad, for whatever the reason. They're evil. Money's the root of all evil, whatever the belief is. So you hear that. And at some point, subconsciously, there's a belief, if I have money, my mom, my dad, my parents, they won't accept me. So then here you are decades later, and you're starting to build wealth for yourself, and then you keep sabotaging it. And you don't know why. That there seems to be this financial glass ceiling, that you get to a certain point, and then you take your foot off the gas, and you don't know why. Where you're like, the motivation's there, and then it seems to wane. And then you go down, and then now you're in that like kind of, oh my gosh territory. And then you bring it back up. But then right when you hit that glass ceiling again, that thermostat financially, let's say, you turn right back off. Because deep down, you've got this programming that isn't true, but you believe it's true. I think of it as just like an inner child within each of us. And that inner child's always listening, always present. That's the yeah, but. That's the what about this, what about that. So the first is the identity limiter. That's the first of the horsemen you want to get rid of. Everyone's showing up with these. The second and third go together, and I call them emotional and mental baggage. And the emotional baggage is the stuck emotional energy. This is the anger, the sadness, the fear, the hurt, the guilt, the shame, the anxiety, rejection, abandonment, etc. And these aren't negative in a good or bad sense. It's more about at a polarity, like a magnet, let's say, has a positive and a negative side, or a battery does. The positive side's not good. It's just the positive side of the battery. And so in a similar way, these emotions are meant to be felt. They came up for a reason. But we live in a society that, for the most part, we've been conditioned as men and as women to not express. There's a story that I would hear growing up all the time, it's like, be a man, don't cry, as an example. And women have their own. My girlfriend was just telling me, so many women have been conditioned, it's not okay to express anger. For men, a lot of men have been conditioned, it's not okay to express fear.
I can tell you in the Ketchen household, that is not a problem. I can tell you that right now. Shout out to Hannah. She's very expressive.
Yeah, perfect.
Being married to me takes a lot.
She's done her work.
So there it is. Yes.
And so we've got this, for most men, there's this, it's not okay to show fear. It's not okay to show sadness. If you are, some people say, apologizing is a sign of weakness. Like whatever story they've got, I have this three-pronged approach that I think of it, and you and I have talked about it a lot. Life happens. I interpret it. I experience my interpretation. This is my 3 stages to life. But whatever you're feeling in the moment, you say it's because of life. You say it's because life is happening a certain way. It's the economy. It's the situation in that country or this country. It's something going on in my neighborhood. When it's actually your interpretation about it, because there's someone else in the same place who has a different thought or a different mindset around that thing.
Yep.
But we say it's because of the external world that I feel this way. And that's never the case.
Yeah, it's a victim mindset. It's let me blame somebody else what's going on, really, is what it comes back to.
Yeah, and so with the emotional side, that's the emotional baggage.
Yep.
The mental baggage, similar to the identity limiters, it's beliefs and specifically things that I call core wounds. And just like that guy's mindset, that client of mine who said, if I'm number one, my dad will finally tell me he loves me. One of his core wounds is like my success equals like, my love. Another one that's so common with entrepreneurs, it's so interesting that the higher performing the person that I work with, the more they have these. And it's, I'm not enough. I don't matter. I'm not important. So you think about it. If I believe I'm not enough or I don't matter, potentially, it could go one or two ways at least. One way is I could shrink and get smaller as a result of that. But the other way is I'm going to overcompensate on the external, make so much money, I got more money than God, and I'm going to have the biggest house on the block and all these things to prove that I'm enough. That's driving so many people. But the thing is, deep down, even when they get that pleasure is short-lived.
Yep.
And now they feel that void. And so I've had people come to me that are 8-9 figures or more, of wealth, and they'll say, I know you work with people around goals and all these things. And he's like, I don't want more money. I don't want the business. I just can you help me with this void? I'm not happy. I don't even know what happiness means. I don't know the last time I felt peace. I thought all this would get it for me, but it's not doing it. And so this mental emotional baggage, it's these core wounds, the core wound, it's almost like in Harry Potter, like Voldemort's name is he who shall not be named.
Yeah.
Like we don't even want to say his name because we're so afraid of him. The core wound is what's the belief that you dare not speak its name.
Yeah.
It's so scary that you're afraid that it's true. And so there's the core wound, there's limiting beliefs that you have about yourself, about other people, and about the world. And so that's 3 of the 4, and then the 4th horseman is a lack of clarity and certainty that's holding you back. And so when you take those 4, I see anyone who works with me, they've got a combination of all 4 of those. And then the first step is always freeing them from that. And once they're freed of that, it's almost like I'm wearing glasses right now. I don't know if this is video or audio, both, but if I take them off right now and I walk around and I say, where are my glasses? Where are my glasses? Like they're in my hands. But if I don't know that they're here, I walk around looking forever for them. Or if they're on my face, but the rim is large enough and I can't see the border, I'll search the whole world looking for something that's been with me my entire life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but to me, that's the biggest thing about mindset. Like one thing that's always been big for me on our journey, and everyone's always got their own process, and I think it ties to what you just said, is I'm big on exposure, right? I'm big on, it's been interesting in my own life when I look back. Like we grew up in the same town, obviously in Haverhill. And I remember being a child and just thinking like some of the nicer homes, on the way to like the stadium. Not to get too personal for people who don't know Haverhill, but I think, oh wow, that's like so well, because that was your world, right?
Yeah.
Then you get a little bit bigger, and then I was thinking about this day. I was like, oh my God, I remember when we finally had we were millionaires. This is, oh God, so many years now again at this point. Looking on our balance sheet, because Lord knows we're real estate investors, still cash poor and equity rich. But I was thinking about that today. I was like, man, I remember that was such a monumental task. Being like, wow, that could never happen. And thinking about it.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's like you don't even stop and think, because to your point, it's that constant grind.
Yep.
And I'm always big on the more you get exposed, I feel like the more you can do. But what I'm also trying to always balance is that intentionality, that being present with your wife, being present with your loved ones and your friends. What are some techniques? And I don't know if you have a question to jump into, but that was a selfish, perfect segue for me. What are some tips and techniques you see? Because how do you fill that void without just getting more and more and more?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I may not be crystal clear on the question, but I'll answer it the way I heard it.
Yep.
And if I missed anything, you guys can jump in. So I think first and foremost, there's a quote that I love that I learned from a mentor of mine. Sometimes you've got to slow down to speed up.
Oh, yeah.
And, we live in a world that, especially with people who consider themselves high performers, people who are really wanting to go after it and create as much impact, income, whatever it is that they're looking for, they think if I slow down, I'm going to lose everything. Or if I slow down, I lose the momentum. But there's a Stephen Covey quote, I think it's Stephen Covey, but the idea is if you're sprinting down the road, but you're going in the wrong direction, it doesn't really matter how fast you run. Right? So you're coming from the space of, wouldn't you be better off to stop and reevaluate?
Yeah.
And make sure this is still the direction I want to go in? Because if it's not, you're going to have to turn around anyway. Might as well turn around now versus 6 miles down the road where now you got 6 miles more to go.
100%.
So I would recommend everyone first to slow down and check in with yourself. I've been going after whatever I've been going after for however long, weeks, months, years, decades. Am I happy? Am I feeling a sense of fulfillment? I come from a space, it kind of becomes a cliche at this point, but the idea of life is about the journey, not just the destination.
Yep.
I like shifting it where the destination, or the journey rather, is the destination. And that's another way of saying fall in love with the process. Because you've got a process and you've got an outcome, and outcomes are great. But think of it like the Wizard of Oz thing I said earlier. Oz is your outcome. But if you're rushing through to get there, you miss the process. And also at the same time, think about A to Z. I love this metaphor of the alphabet. A is where you start, Z is your goal.
Yep.
And if you say, I'll be happy when I get to Z, goes back to the horseman, that's mental baggage. That's a belief that you've just created, like an if-then statement. I'll be happy when, I'll be successful when, I'll be enough when, which is your own creation that has nothing to do with reality. Because somebody else has a different definition of I'll be happy when. So you're basically saying, I will give myself permission to feel happy when I get to Z, using this A to Z metaphor. But what that means is there you are at A, and then you start B, C, D, etc. But what you're saying is, I'm not there yet, I'm not there yet, I'm not there yet. I'm not, this isn't happening, you're getting frustrated. In reality, If you shifted it and say you're at A, you start doing some work, now you're at E, and you go, wow, E was a dream when I was at A.
Yep.
And then you could sit there and say, I'm not at Z yet, but I'm so proud of myself for the work that I've done thus far. So now that small win, which is big, small and big are relative, but the idea of you just celebrate it, your progress, and the word appreciation, I love thinking about it. There's two meanings to it, at least. One is more of like a gratitude, thanks type of definition, but the other one is in the world of finance.
Yep.
Whatever appreciates goes up in value. So what you appreciate appreciates, meaning whatever you appreciate for you becomes more valuable. So if you appreciate a person in your life, a child, a parent, a spouse, a partner, whoever, they become more valuable for you in your mind. If you appreciate yourself on the journey becomes more special. It becomes more memorable. That old like stop and smell the roses kind of thing. Yeah. And so if you're saying, I'm not there yet, I'm not there yet, I'm not there yet, that mindset is going to either make it where you do arrive at some point, but your journey was terrible. And now you're that person who's 8, 9 figures or more, and you're telling me, can you help me fill the void? There's an old quote, I think it's the Dalai Lama, but either way, he basically said, someone said, yeah, it is him, but somebody goes, what confuses you most? And he says, man, and the quote's like a paragraph, so I'll skip to the key part here. Man will trade his health and his time for money, and then later try to trade all that money back for time and health. And so with that in mind, what if you shifted to, wow, I'm at E, I'm at K, I'm at M, and you're celebrating it along the way, then it becomes the rewards in and of itself. So if I said, for example, you see a little kid or maybe an adult, and they jump into the beach and they're making like a sand angel or something, or a snow angel or a castle or something. What's the purpose of that? Like, why are they doing it? There's no purpose beyond fun. Like, I just felt like doing it. If you start dancing right now, why are you dancing? It's a weird question because I feel it. My body wants to move. It's the same idea that if you're falling in love with your journey along the way, then the irony is you're more likely to get there faster and enjoy it along the way. Yep. But even if you didn't get there, for whatever the reason, you changed your mind, you didn't want to do it anymore, you died, like something happened. But at that point, it almost didn't matter because you love the journey of creating it. I remember hearing years ago, Gary Vaynerchuk, if you guys know who that is, and somebody was interviewing him and he was talking about, they said, you're a multimillionaire. Why are you going to garage sales? And he's like going through New Jersey bins in the middle of a garage sale. And he's like, he thought it was a weird question. He goes, I love the hunt. He's like, I love walking in there and wondering, is today the day I'm going to find that 1957 like Superman stuffed animal thing that's worth like $2 million? Yeah. And with that in mind, it's not about the money. It's about the joy. And when you love what you're doing, and there's a level of passion behind it where you slowed down, you checked in with yourself, like you said, if I've got 100 years, great. But if I've got 5 years left, if I've got 3 years left, if I've got 12 months left, is this how I'd want to spend my time?
Well, we gotta just stay with it. I mean, we did an appreciation celebration dinner last week for just that week. We closed. I was at an event recently, and unfortunately, someone's spouse. I mean, it was so surreal. These people are uber successful, multimillionaires many times over, just unbelievable married power couple entrepreneurs, and they're at the event with us. She says she has a headache. Fast forward 2 months later, she passes away.
Yeah.
You go from standing next to this person, right, and they're at the pinnacle. I mean, they've done everything the right way, and it put things in perspective really quick. And I was like, you know what? We went from, I remember when we used to celebrate everything.
I know. I was thinking about that too at that dinner.
Yeah, so
we used to slow down, smell the roses a lot more, and
Yes.
celebrate those big wins or small wins.
Yeah.
And now we've gotten away from that, and now we're like, we got to get back into
And that's
that.
why I was so adamant about bringing that back together. And I'm sure everyone's moaning and groaning on a Wednesday. But I think it was pretty good once everyone got there. But doing more of that for what you just said, because what I'm becoming conscious of is we would have killed, and we say this on the podcast all the time, but we would have killed to have the problems we have today 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
We couldn't even think big enough to have those problems now. And it's, please, because I was going to go to the
So,
go.
Just this idea, for everyone who's listening, I want you to think about, look at your life right now as it's being experienced. And this might apply business-wise, financially, like you just talked about. It could apply in your health, fitness. It could apply in your relationship. In some area of your life, more than likely, the life you're living right now is the dream you had 1, 3, 5, 10 years ago.
Yep.
It might be the neighborhood you live in. It might be the bank account, the way it looks. It could be the relationship that you got out of or got into, whatever it might be. And yet this was a dream of yours. At that moment of wanting it, you're like, nothing's more important. I want that more than anything. Now you have it and you're complaining.
Yep.
Like now you have it and you completely lost track because it's the I'll be happy when. If you've got the I'll be happy when, successful when, etc., this is what you're saying. I'll be happy when, which means sometime in the future, AKA not now, but now is the only time you can ever experience anything. You've never experienced yesterday and you'll never experience tomorrow. You only experience now. So if you'll say, I'll be happy when my bank account has X amount of dollars in it,
Yep.
then at some point, it may not happen, which means you were never happy, or it might happen, but then you'll realize you had it for a little bit, little joy, a little something, excitement, and then it fades, and then you go, hold on, I thought maybe that would do it for me. And rather than go inward and find it, you'll end up saying more than likely, maybe I thought too low. I thought it was 5 million. Maybe it's 10. And then you go right back on the hamster wheel and you do the exact same thing. And then if and when you get to 10, the exact same thing happens, but now it's worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because now you realize I just got what I wanted even more. I'm more quote unquote successful in the outside world's perspective than I've ever been. And I feel the most empty and the most alone and the most miserable than I've ever been.
Well, that goes back to the relationship piece.
Yep.
And that's what I was going to go with the next. It's, when we started Commonwealth Collective, I say this all the time. We didn't have, I wish I could sit here and say we had this amazing vision. It'd be like, we're going to be this $1 billion. That wasn't the plan.
Nope.
Yeah.
It just kind of evolved. And you talked about the relationship piece. That's one thing that's, when we worked together, full disclosure, I said, hey, I want to be a better leader and a better husband. And the whole idea there was, I don't feel like I ever work. My wife, who's also an owner in the company, feels like all I do is work.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting dichotomy to work through because I do love the process. I love the game. I mean, there's stresses. Other times, I'll call
Sure.
mad and curse about something. I mean, sure. That's
only
any
a business.
business.
Though. Yeah.
But it's like today, I got a little, excitement, that butterfly feeling. He's getting on a plane Wednesday. Let's go look at another big deal. And we're like, all right, here we go again. Yeah. Well, we can do that. It's fun, right? But I think it's that balancing. And you said something to me a long time ago that really resonated with me. It was funny. It wasn't even in this context, but it's a perfect segue. It's all about how you show up. Like you gave the story of, they go to this event and there's two guys that are considered the top in the industry sitting next to each other and they're listening to the speaker and one guy goes, looks over at the guy who's next to him and says, can you believe what this guy's saying? We already know this. And the guy who's the top of the industry with them is taking notes frivolously and he's saying, oh my God, it's unbelievable. That story hit me in such a way to the point I was just at a high level mastermind, shout out to the 50. They asked me to speak to the group at the start of the group. Now this room is full of multimillionaires, soon to be some billionaires.
Yeah.
And the message I was trying to relay came from that conversation where I was like, guys, it's all about how you show up for anything.
Yep.
What you get out of any experience is how you show up. If you show up willing to learn, if you show up willing to receive, if you show up willing to grow, you're showing up with a mindset that you can't help but grow and win.
Yep.
But if you show up with IKB, I know better, I got the answers, why do I need that? You're stuck. And that was something that when we started working together, I mean, I thought I was pretty open-minded. That was one of my bigger takeaways in our time together was that just really going full throttle and open your eyes up and being willing to learn in every situation. Wow, that's a powerful thing if you want to comment on that.
I would love to. And I'm so glad that resonated with you so strongly. Excuse me. That is one of the foundational pieces that I find that, again, it's interesting where some of the most profound wisdom is so common sense after you hear it, but it's the last thing you ever thought about before you heard it.
Yep.
Right? So it sounds so simple what I'm about to say, but it is the foundation of all the work I do. And who are you being and how are you showing up? Where are you coming from? So I mentioned earlier those 4 horsemen. So if I'm coming from a belief that I'm not enough, that I don't belong, and then I walk into a mastermind like Michael's talking about, how am I going to have conversations? Like, what's the energy like? They're going to feel something's off because they're going to feel like I seem nervous. I seem like I'm in the corner. I seem reserved. Why? Because deep down, I might not even know, but deep down, I don't believe I belong there. If I'm about to have a conversation with a business partner, a spouse, a intimate relationship partner, whatever it might be, and where I'm coming from is frustrated and pissed off, how's that interaction likely going to go?
Not well.
Because the actions that stem from frustrated and pissed off are not the same actions that stem from love, patience, and understanding. So who are you being and where are you coming from? And so that, in that moment, that story I shared with you, these two people top in their industry. The first guy is, I teach this stuff. I already know this. I don't even know why I'm here. What a waste of my time. The other guy teaches this also, but he's scribbling so many notes and he's like, I'm getting stories in a different way. The way that they're teaching it, it's landing for me. I've never heard it spoken like this before. I love the way he or she taught that. That was amazing. So if you show up always open, everyone I meet knows something I don't. They can teach me something I've never learned before. There could be, you and I could work together for a year, and that could have been the only thing you ever took, and that would have paid for the investment 100 times over.
Yep.
If you actually apply it. And so you sit there and you go, where am I coming from? So my invitation to everyone listening, for the rest of today, I want you to just think about, or what do I have to do for the rest of today? Maybe I'm going to spend time with kids. Maybe I'm going to spend time with my spouse. Maybe I'm about to meet with a potential customer or client, or a current customer or client. Maybe I have a meeting I'm about to have with a business owner, whatever you're about to do. Or maybe I'm going to take some time for me. Where do you want to be coming from when you do that would support you in creating the most powerful result? So if I'm taking time for me, I've been working really hard. Do I want to come from a place of feeling guilty about the time that I'm taking for myself? Or do I want to come from a space of, you know what? Sometimes you got to slow down to speed up. I heard that in some great podcasts, you know?
Yep.
And then with that in mind, now you slow down to speed up and you get present and you go, I'm going to give myself this time to recharge. So when I go back into my work, I can throw myself at it in full force, not be drained and burned out and tired, right? Different way of coming from. You know, there's something I'm going to share at the event later on today was the impact of me working with a gentleman for 13 months. And when we started, so many areas of his life transformed, business, personal, but one story in particular, his relationship with his wife was non-existent. Zero passion. They've been together for like 10, 15 years, and it was just falling apart. And he's like, oh yeah, doc, there's no way you're turning that around. And I said, would you like help turning it around? He's like, well, yeah, but his story is not possible.
Yep.
So if you come from that place, not happening.
Yeah, you've already put up the barrier.
Yeah. So fast forward 13 months, and along the way, I'm going to share some screenshots today, and you will see, it's like, doc, my wife just told me thank you for the greatest year of my life. And beautiful, loving messages. He goes, I've never gotten things like these before. I didn't think that was possible. I hope you know how big of a difference you made for my family. And the thing was, in his mind, that wasn't possible. And if you believe it's not possible, you show up from that way of being. So if I believe something's not possible, how much action am I going to take? Mm-hmm. What's the point? Not much.
You're going to assume failure.
I'm going to assume failure, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then it won't happen. But if where I show up is like, there's always a way, I can find a way, whatever story you have, it's not about positive thinking. It's about recognizing that your language creates your reality. Yep. The story you tell about your experience becomes your experience. Mm-hmm. So if I say, I can't do that, this isn't possible for me, it's the old Henry Ford quote, like, he who thinks he can, he who thinks he can't are both usually right. Mm-hmm. And so what stories are you putting on yourself? I love the idea of when you have a word, how do you create a word? You spell it. So now think of it from like a, fantasy kind of perspective. What happens when you cast a spell? Well, something in the world happens. There's some effect. So you're casting spells over your life with your language.
Yep.
And the moment you talk about yourself in a way that discourages you, disempowers you, it's like the old original Star Wars movie. Obi-Wan Kenobi is trying to like mess with the Death Star, and he turns the knob, and it's like, ooh. That's what you're doing when you're dimming your shine. You're dimming that light, and then you wonder why you decreased your power. You
also
decreased your output.
On this podcast, you just showed everyone how much of a science fiction nerd you are. Just totally went off the rails.
Oh, I own it.
I wasn't going to bring up the World of Warcraft stuff, but I mean, here we are. You know what I mean?
That was 8 years of my life, and I
we're
love
just,
all of it.
Like, little side note, just to lighten it, because that was amazing advice. We're a couple months into the sessions, and he just lets it casually slip. At one point, he's like one of the highest rated World of Warcraft players in the world.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, what the fuck? Like, just out of nowhere. I'm like, here's this like discipline back to how we perceive others, right? And that's one thing I'm always big on, like, especially for me, the way people perceive me. But I'm like, I think, discipline, like doctor, academic, like nowhere in there was wow, because I'm like, okay, that's like a full-time thing. And it's just, it's interesting. And that's kind of the last, and Nick, how are we doing on time? Are we going way over, or where are we at?
45 minutes.
Okay, all right. So I'll wrap it up shortly, but this is one big thing that I really wanted to get to with you here and get Matt's input. I think as entrepreneurs, the biggest thing that I think I'm now very aware of that I wasn't aware of before, everybody gets to meet the version of you that you show them. Mm-hmm. And the intentionality you show up with and the way you experience yourself and the way other people experience you it can be limiting or it can be empowering. And what I mean by that is I have, a lot of energy. I have a big personality. Well, I'm just me. I was never aware of that. Well, people gravitate towards that. So I can lean into that and I can become the way people view me, or I can hold on to some of those limiting beliefs that, hey, I'm just a poor kid from Haverhill, and hey, I can't be that successful. I can't be that big. And I've said it before, I still feel even like with Commonwealth Collective, sometimes we've held ourselves back, mostly because of me. We're saying, well, I don't want to bring in a financial underwriter because what if our models aren't as good as I think, or I don't know how to answer these things I don't know. And the work with you, it's not coincidental that in the last 18 months, basically, we've almost tripled in size.
Yeah.
We're a $100 million company now. And a lot of that was letting go. Before we wrap this up and find out what people can get out of you, I don't know if you got a final question. What is one big takeaway you would say to those entrepreneurs and people around how you show up as everything, and what the piece of actionable advice to be that real version of yourself that shows up in the world?
Yeah. There's an old quote that I don't like, which is fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
And I don't like it because it's basically where you're coming from. You're leading with inauthenticity. And fake it till you make it is something that you can't outrun it because you will always know that you're wearing a mask. I come from this space as the word persona. The word persona means actor's mask. I believe it's Latin. And the idea that when you're wearing the mask, you've got this story that you're running with. Who do I need to be loved, to be accepted, to be special, to be popular, to be whatever it might validate it, whatever it might be. And then you play that part. You play what you believe other people expect you to be, want you to be, who you should be, etc. But even when you do that and you think you won the game, you go, they like me. They don't even know you. They know who you're pretending to be. And because that's bullshit, then deep down, there's this knowing that something's not right. And so what I'd encourage everyone to do, and some people could say easier said than done, but I'd also say that's a choice. And so you're choosing that it's easier said than done. What if you just took the mask off? What if you actually led with your heart and you actually led with, this is who I feel called to be. This is the impact I want to make in the world. This is the business I want to start. These are the causes or whatever, philanthropic, whatever it might be, that really resonate with my spirit. And you just deliver that. The interesting thing is some people won't like that. And what if that was okay? What if it was okay that not everybody has to love your version of your life? What if you have to love it? What if you value your opinion of you more than other people's opinion of you? That doesn't mean don't care what they think. We live in a world, I think it's a little bit maybe naive to think, what they think isn't important, because what they think is going to impact you. I'm going to give a talk later on today. I care what they think to a certain degree, but I also value my opinion of me more than other people's opinion of me. Because if I value other people's opinion of me, I'm going to keep shifting, and I'm always going to be, Michael, who do you think I should be? Matt, who do you think I should be? Hey, Nick, who do you think I should be? But coming from that space versus who do I feel called to be? What feels authentic, so that I can look myself in the mirror every day and genuinely say, if today was my last day on this earth, I'm good with that. I'm at peace with that. I'm proud of how I've showed up and what I've created thus far. Yes, I've got goals and dreams that are relatively big. And I've got goals and dreams that are probably not going to be accomplished in the next 5, 10, 15 years because they're big. And at the same time, if it ended here, I'm living it. I'm living the dream right now.
Present in the moment.
And so, so it's coming from the space of, rather than living for the dream, like one day, I'm living the dream actively. And that's not a me thing. That's something that everyone listening has the option to step into. But again, to bring it all together, you got to slow down, take a moment to stop and get into reflection. Give yourself a couple hours. Give yourself a weekend. Give yourself a week, whatever it might be. Am I happy right now? And if no one's happy all the time, but am I happy right now? Am I fulfilled? Is my life moving in the direction, or a better way of saying it for me would be, am I being the version of me that I believe I should be being? And if the answer is no, especially if it's no consistently, what needs to change? And then what's the block? What are you afraid of? What conversation are you afraid of having? What relationship that's not working are you afraid of ending?
Yep.
What is that? Because it's like the elephant in the room that until you address it, it's going to run your life. Carl Jung, he's a famous psychologist back in the day, and he had a quote. I'm going to paraphrase it if I don't get it exactly, but he says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So that's those 4 horsemen I was talking about. It's everything going on under the hood that's driving you that you have no idea about. And then until you deal with that, you're going to say, this is just the way that I am. This is just the way my life is, and I can't do anything about it. But the moment you can make a choice, something needs to change in the way that I'm living my life. And the beauty is you could start small, because you could say right now, given our conversation so far, how can I show up 1% more? Insert the word. Bold, courageous, loving, understanding, compassionate, fun, whatever it might be, playful, in this next interaction I'm about to have.
Yep.
And just by doing that, you start getting the momentum. Somebody tells me, I'm going to do 1,000 push-ups a day. And I go, okay, when's the last time you did any push-ups? 15 years ago. If you do that, you're setting yourself up to fail. You're likely going to get injured if you do somehow pull it off. And then you're going to not want to do it again. But if I told you, I want you to just do 1 push-up and do it every day for the next, let's say, 30 days. Now, you're going to go, 1? Nothing's going to happen with 1. Well, I'm not thinking about your muscles. I'm thinking about you building up a habit and an identity of I'm the kind of person that does push-ups every day. And then the beauty is, I tell you to do 1, you're probably going to do 10. You're probably going to do 20. You're probably going to do 5. But anything past 1 is a win.
Yep.
Because you made the game winnable. So my final, let's say, loving challenge for everybody, redefine your standards. Like we're in a room called The Standard, right? Redefine your standards where it's no longer I'll be happy, successful, whatever, when something relatively big that's down the road happens. Make it something that you can actually satisfy right now.
Yep.
I'll be successful when I feel proud of myself with the way that I'm living. I'll be happy when I can slow down and enjoy the moment. Because you can do that in this next moment. And then your life just takes off from there.
Awesome.
Great.
You got anything to add before we get out of here?
No, I mean, I'm excited for later on tonight, doing some more deep dives. 'Cause I
Actually,
feel
he's
like
pretty
we've
good at what
only
he does.
scratched the surface. So.
Oh, he's pretty good at what he does. It's actually like Adam, like an Ian. He's a talker. And ready to go with it, but it's fun. Before we get out of here, where can people get a hold of you and learn more about you?
Yeah, man, thank you so much. It's been such a privilege and an honor just to meet you guys in person. Like,
Yep.
We worked together for a year, and first time you pulled up in front of me with the car, beautiful
Yep.
car, and I was just like, on the one hand, I feel like I know you really well, and
Yep.
I feel like I see you all the time, and on the other hand, it's Michael.
Yeah,
There he
yeah,
is.
yeah.
And it's so wonderful to meet the two of you as well. And so thank you to our audience for being here. If this has resonated with you, if you're sitting here saying, all right, I know that I'm scratching like just the tip of the iceberg here, and there's so much more, you're right. And so you can go to my website, jamilsayegh.com, and you can learn more. You can see different people's testimonials. You can see what the work entails. If you're looking for a podcast, I have my own called Transformation Starts Today. Michael was on it, even one of my
Yep.
first episodes. And we dove deep. And it was just an awesome conversation. And on my social media, Instagram is at Dr. Jamil Sayegh, DR in my name. Facebook and LinkedIn are just Jamil Sayegh. I've been putting content out now for about 6-7 years. And it's just things you can do on a daily, weekly basis, empower yourself, shift your mindset, and just get results quickly because it doesn't have to take a long time.
And live in integrity. I like
live
that.
in integrity. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for being here. And as always, bet on yourself.